Today on Sports World, the best in the world from 12 nations. Over 950 miles. A test lasting 16 days. Climbs above 11,300 feet. Descents up to 65 miles per hour. Heat in the 90s. Cold near freezing. The movie American Flyers tells the story of a race called the Hell of the West. Today, you'll see the real Hell of the West, the International Bicycle Classic, on NBC Sports World. The landscape was quiet until they came, tranquil as a summer flower, suddenly tossed in a windy stampede, a headlong charge by a cavalry of cyclists galloping across the American West, over the slopes of the majestic Rocky Mountains, across the expansive ranch land of a cowboy's dreams, through historic towns built on gold rush riches, on the trail of adventure, in a search for glory, risking everything as they crossed the frontier. They are the riders, cowboys on horseback, cyclists on wheels. The spurs and shafts are missing, but the spirit is there. Always ride standing proud in the saddle, aware of the dangers, but fearless as gunslingers at high noon. The new riders of the Western Trails have come from all corners of experience. They are the elite of Eastern Europe, top American amateurs, and new American pros, like Andy Hampsten, king of the mountains, and Doug Shapiro, champion of the open road, and the world's premier sprinter, Davis Phinney. Expatriate American Greg LeMond, 1983 world champion and Tour de France runner-up, and his pro teammate, the incomparable Frenchman, Bernard Hinault, at home on the range while riding in his U.S. debut. A five-time winner of the Tour de France, Hinault says, "Cycling is the hardest sport in the world, and I am the best at it." And he is, at least when racing in Europe. But this is America and the International Bicycle Classic. 84 riders from a dozen nations in a race of individual resolve and team tactics across the American West. This event began 11 years ago in Boulder, Colorado, a two-day race with a time trial, criterium, and road race, and a handful of spectators. But oh, how this race has changed. 500,000 fans have watched since we began 2 weeks ago, and here for the final stage in North Boulder Park, Colorado, there are 50,000 on hand despite threatening skies. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Lewis. Welcome to America's premier cycling event. 950 miles across 3 states, 16 stages, that's 16 races over 15 days. They're calling it the most unique cycling event in the world. Connie Carpenter, gold medalist, tell us why it's got that title.
Well, this really is a rare mix. We've got East meeting West. We have the professionals against the amateurs. We've got fresh new faces who have never raced a race like this coming up against seasoned veterans who have won the toughest races in the world. And within the battleground of each individual stage, we can really see how teamwork helps to get their rider on top.
So the field of racers is terrific. The course, how challenging is it? Alexi Graywall, en route to your gold medal, you rode it many times.
This year it was a really tough race. Between the intense heat in California, the extreme altitude in Colorado, and the really fast speeds and danger in the criteriums day after day for 15 days, it made it a really tough event, Greg.
And this is where we began, San Francisco, a beautiful city by the bay, a metropolis of abrupt hills. A melting pot of culture where singers may leave their hearts, but cyclists have come to find glory. The first race, a prologue time trial, 1.1 miles from Fisherman's Wharf on an uphill grind with a vertical gain of 280 feet to Coit Tower. The prologue determined a race leader. American Ron Kiefel won in 3 minutes, 5.3 seconds, a brilliant performance.
Also surprising was Andy Hampsten, a proven road climber, but really showed his strength here, finishing second, only 5 seconds behind the leader.
Pre-race favorite Greg LeMond, in his first start in America in 4 years, finished third, 6 seconds behind Ron Kiefel, 1 second behind Andy Hampsten. And Bernard Hinault, time trial specialist, seemed unable to find his rhythm and finished a distant 64th.
Hinault and Lamond had come at the bequest of Mo Siegel, entrepreneur, founder of this race, and an ardent supporter of American cycling who had one driving goal.
I really don't want the Soviet Union to win this bike race.
But Siegel should have been more worried about the powerful 7-Eleven American team, masters of strategy, especially in criteriums. They were prepared for stage number 1, a criterium around Fisherman's Wharf.
A criterium is a short course, usually a mile around, which the riders travel many times. In this particular race, the riders will do 60 laps for a total of 42 miles. This course is unique, taking the cyclists in and out of a building, around a hairpin turn and along the pier. It made some of the riders very anxious.
I hope everybody rides real careful, because you miss one corner and you're out there swimming in the ocean.
It's a tight course, you know, it's the first day of the race, people are going to be going for it, you know, and boy, I just can't wait for it to be over.
With a tight hairpin just after the start finish, it really strung out the field in the early going. With the crowd flashing by at 40 miles an hour, high speed through the turns, and the transition from light to dark into the building, Greg LeMond and Canadian sensation Alex Dieter broke away from the field with 2 laps to go.
The strain of the race, the danger of the course, showed in the faces of the athletes as they came down to the final corner.
And Alex Dieter coming from behind LeMond for a tremendous victory.
Steeda played it perfectly, riding on Lamond's wheel, letting him break the wind, then slipping off to the side and sprinting in for the victory. Even though he won, he, Lamond, and the rest of the pack shared the same time. In criterium racing, when there's a big group of racers finishing close together, they all get the same time. Thus, the general classification, the overall standings, remained the same. Ron Kiefel was still number 1, momentarily safe in first as the Classic moved to its next stage, a road race across the wine country. The move from San Francisco to Sonoma brought a change in the character of the race, from city streets to country roads. Stage number 2, meaning race number 2, Sonoma to Sacramento. Once the last frontier of Mexico, Sonoma is the beginning of the frontier of agony on the open road. And the open road extends for 87 miles, from Sonoma up over Trinity Road Summit, down into the Napa Valley, and on to Sacramento. Total vertical climbing of 3,700 feet.
Greg, the real difficulty in this course is the early climbs. It's difficult for the riders to warm up. And as they go over the climbs, they drop into the Napa Valley and Sacramento Valley, and it gets very hot.
As the race began, the cyclists pulled out of town easily. Alexei, it seemed like they were on a Sunday stroll.
At the beginning of the races, it's often real easy, real slow, as riders are feeling each other out, getting used to their bikes again. It can be real easy in the first few miles.
But at the town of Glen Ellen and the turn onto Trinity Road, the tempo, the pace, and the philosophy of the race began to change. It was time for the first ascent.
Here you see Chris Carmichael and Roy Nickman already struggling on the first hill.
Others struggled even more severely. Oleg Logvan of the Soviet Union crashed.
It's really easy to fall, skip a gear on a climb like this. You're going so hard, you're almost blinded. Just look at his teammate, really struggling.
For another perspective, Connie Carpenter Phinney watched the race from a helicopter.
As they come around the turn, you can see that some of the fans have come out to paint some road signs out. We've got some signs for Gavin Chilpat, who's a local boy from Santa Rosa. Some signs for Ernie, that's the nickname of Andy Hampston, and of course there's a sign for Greg LeMond. It's a very difficult, very steep climb. It's not a very long climb, but it's very steep. The pack's starting to split up already. We have several riders off the back.
The steep climb was not the only problem. For Olaf Jensch of the East German team, a flat tire slowed him down. Up ahead, Andy Hampston made a break, followed by 3 other racers.
Only Canadian Steve Bauer, Greg LeMond, and Doug Shapiro could stay with Hampston. And on the descent, 4 riders go into the trees, and only 3 riders come out. Andy Hampston crashed on one of the tight turns of the steep descent.
But shaking off his injuries, he rides strongly and comes back to the group. Crashes are a part of racing, and you just have to accept them.
After 25 miles into the race, the hills were no longer a problem. The athletes had reached a flat, but the cyclists faced a new barrier, an intense, searing heat.
Riders carry 2 water bottles and must drink constantly throughout the race to prevent dehydration.
70 miles into the race, at Davis, California, the critical moment came. Steve Bauer shoots off to win a town sprint, then looks back to find the other 3 racers are not coming with him. The decision, does he go on or let the others catch him?
With no reaction from Doug Shapiro and Andrew Hampton, Steve Bauer pushes on alone.
But Alexi, why would they let him go? Everyone knows Bauer is tough.
It seemed apparent, Greg, that Andrew Hampton was really fatigued from his crash, and it also seems apparent that Doug Shapiro just made a real tactical blunder, and Steve's going to come in for a real comfortable solo victory.
Steve Bauer, the Olympic silver medalist, always a factor in the International Bicycle Classic, picks up his first stage win. His time, 3 hours and 23 minutes, followed by Greg LeMond and Doug Shapiro. Bauer, LeMond, and Shapiro, first, second, and third, got their respective bonus reductions of time, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, and 10 seconds. In the overall standings, Bauer's win moved him into the lead. 80 miles of racing, but the day isn't over. Behind the Capitol building that stands over Sacramento, another race site, Old Sacramento, a town where the past is preserved and the flavor of the turn of the century rolls on to the present day. This statue commemorates the Pony Express, whose western roots ended here in Old Sacramento. They were fearless riders, cowboys on a galloping horse in a mad dash. That's what a criterium is, cowboys in a mad dash. Only the horses are bicycles.
This is a European-style criterium course. European because it includes a long stretch of very bumpy cobbles. This short 28-mile race, combined with a longer road race earlier today, make this day particularly exhausting.
Cobble, a road surface that can last for hundreds of years, can destroy a $2,000 19-pound bike in minutes.
I rode the cobbles. It's a special brand of torture. Hanging onto your bars is like hanging onto a jackhammer. And your hands get blistered, you even get a headache from pounding along all the time. If you lose your speed, if you lose your rhythm, it's really difficult to get your speed up again, so you have to hold your speed throughout the entire stretch.
Unlike a running race where each competitor is on his own, in bicycle racing, and especially in criteriums, it's a team effort that makes the difference.
That's a good point, Greg. Team tactics play a critical role in winning a race like this. The sprinter moves up to the front, but it's his teammates who help to set the pace and protect him so he has enough energy for the final 200-meter sprint.
Ron Kiefel and Doug Shapiro have done an excellent job of this, and Davis Phinney's coming through for the win. And it's a team's victory as well.
The top group all received the same time, 55 minutes, 27 seconds. But the victor, Phinney, followed by second LeMond, and third, Stefan Gay, received their respective time reduction bonuses of 30, 20, and 10 seconds. The overall standings remained the same, with 760 miles to go. But for Davis Phinney, first jubilation and an interview by his wife.
I bet this is the first time you get to get a kiss first when you're being interviewed. How did it feel? Tell me about the cobbles.
Those were so tough. I mean, it was just terrible. It was every man for himself out there. It was unbelievable. You were just so battered. My hands are going to be so arthritic tomorrow. I'm going to be dead.
Have you ever had a race like this before, Davis?
No way, no way. This whole race is incredible. Every day is a new experience.
Well, congratulations. Where are we going for dinner?
Hey, anywhere you want, baby.
Davis Phinney had struck it rich. The other racers would get their chance when the Classic moved on to Gold Country for stage number 4. Stage number 4, a road race through the Gold Country of California. But the talk here was not of the fortunes of the past, but of the problems of Bernard Hinault in the present.
My role in the Sonoma-Sacramento road race was to help Greg and Steve. And as for the Sacramento criterium, it was much too dangerous, and I didn't want to take any risks. The race is not over, and I think my time will come.
But would it come this day? A day of oppressive heat, unfamiliar to Europeans. At the start, the East Germans had the fatigue race. But the finish wouldn't come. But would it come this day? A day of oppressive heat, unfamiliar to Europeans. At the start, the East Germans had the fatigued look of riders who'd already finished the race. But the finish wouldn't come for 102 miles. Stage 5 was the longest race of the Classic, and one of the most difficult, 8,100 feet of climbing, up over Yuba Pass and down into the valley of Truckee, California.
This profile map graphically illustrates the rolling terrain at the start and a long climb up Yuba Pass. On a cool day, this race would be difficult, but on a hot day, it's miserable.
Despite the heat, Bernard Hinault leads the pace up the climb, and then a mechanical problem. He summons his team support vehicle.
Bernard has a flat. These tires are pressurized to 110 pounds, and the tire itself is made out of silk and only weighs 8 ounces or less. With a good team vehicle, a good mechanic, he'll be back in the race on the pace quickly.
And indeed, Hinault is back soon, pushing to gain on the leaders. And there is a new man out in front.
That's right. French national team rider Felix Urban has escaped from the pack and is 2 minutes ahead as he heads into Downieville.
The race is on, and so is the unique adventure of this route. Below the road, a modern-day miner sluices for gold, unaware of the cyclists above, whose treasure is still 78 miles away.
Back in the pack, Bernard Hinault signals for food. Here's the feed zone, and riders can take up nourishment. They start out the race with a few water bottles and some food in their jersey pockets, but have to take up food along the way to supplement that and get them to the finish line.
Riders usually eat cookies and fruit and sometimes an electrolyte drink to keep them going. But this Irishman, Paul McCormick, just might be hiding a pint of ale.
For the tiny town of Downieville, this is the day of days. The entire symphony has turned out to greet the racers. And first in, Felix Urban, still out in front of the pack. This is the gallows in Downieville, California. They haven't hung anyone here in 100 years, but it is symbolic. For the bicycle racers up ahead, a 4,000-foot vertical climb over 20 miles. For some, it could be a long, slow death.
The pack sweeps into town, some 2 minutes behind Felix Urban, and confident that they'll catch him on the road to Yuba Pass.
1, 2, 3.
The field leaves Downieville to the melody of an American anthem. But for Bernard Hinault, the tune of his attack is Le Marseillaise and Glory for France.
Over the top of the pass, the leader has been reabsorbed, and the pack is relatively intact. It's a new race from here.
I said to Davis, I said, why don't you attack? I bet no one goes with you. And he attacked, and well, Hinault went with him, and I think it's a good situation. Now that Steve Speaks is up there, there's 2 riders working. And even if Hinault sits on, I'm sure Davis will beat him in the sprint.
So we're hoping that Hinault is just holding on to the wheels here and won't attack. And that Davis and Steve can stay in the lead with them. It's hard to say if he's strong or not because he hasn't been pulling in this break.
To conserve energy, Bernard Hinault had laid back and let the others do the work. Then as they came into Truckee, Davis Phinney made his move. But it was ill-timed. He mistook a rodeo banner over Main Street for the finish line. 200 yards later, he'd lost the power of his unbeatable sprint. Hinault slipped by on the inside to take a controversial victory. Though some thought Hinault's refusal to pull in the 3-man break diminished the integrity of his first U.S. triumph, the Frenchman was ecstatic.
After 102 miles, Hinault won the race with this move. Staying right in Davis's draft all the way into the last moment and then using his tremendous power to slingshot by him.
Davis, you did all the work coming into the finish. How do you feel about finishing second?
Well, you know, I guess you got to win that way. You got to win that way. It's about the least honorable way I can think of to win a race.
Why didn't you want to pull?
I didn't want to pull right away because I'm not stupid. I had the 2 other guys right there, so I waited towards the end.
Dishonorable or not, Bernard Hinault won in 4 hours, 36 minutes, and 49 seconds. In the overall standings, the general classification, Steve Bauer held on to the lead. Davis Phinney moved into second. In the team standings, Bernard Hinault and Greg LeMond's Red Zinger team held the lead. Davis Phinney's 7-11 team attacked in second. Next, a stage race billed as a downhill event from Tahoe to Reno. Stage number 5 starts at the splendor of Lake Tahoe and ends in Reno, hometown of Greg LeMond. Before the race, a planning session with coach Paul Coakley.
Après Carson City jusqu'ici. Et pour, tu connais la finale, pas de problème, tu connais. Donc ils disent il y a 250, 300 yards.
From Tahoe to Reno is 67 miles and an interesting course, a downhill descent from the forested Lake Tahoe into the deserts of Nevada, up through Carson City, Virginia City, and a sprint into Reno.
Yes, it's a short climb out of Lake Tahoe and a fast descent down to Carson City, another deceptive climb, and it's downhill into Reno.
And the danger of cycling is immediately apparent in this steep descent. Alexei Grelo, on this downhill stretch, we're going 60 miles an hour. What's that like on a bicycle?
It's really scary when you're with 60, 70 riders, because one mistake and you can go down, and if you go down at 60 miles an hour, you get hurt.
Into Carson City, Greg LeMond feels the pressure of a homecoming. He's lived in Europe since 1981. This race marks his return. We're on a road that Greg LeMond has trained on many, many times, the climb to Virginia City. Alexei, does it make a difference if you know the route?
Especially on a climb, it makes a big difference because you know where the top are, you know where the steepest sections are, and you can time your efforts according to the road.
The pack was shattered early on. It was a difficult climb, and Hampsten rode aggressively, attacking at the base. LeMond went with him, knowing that this climb would be his.
Then LeMond took the lead, wearing the yellow Sprint Leaders jersey, the fastest sprinter in the field. Hampsten followed in the purple Mountain jersey, the best climber in the field. But who would win here, the sprinter or the climber? Connie went back on a motorcycle to take a look.
I just came from the break. Greg LeMond and Andrew Hampsten are a minute up on the chase group, and they're looking very fresh. Greg LeMond knows this course, and he's riding it for all it's worth.
When I'm racing, it's, time passes. We'll be on a 6 or 7 hour race, but it goes by so quick. It's such a technical sport, and it's like car racing and running and combined. You got to be very smart, but you've also got to be physically one of the strongest, especially when it comes to like stage races.
Every year I get a little bit better, and things don't really get easier, but they start falling into place. And the more I learn about the sport, the more I learn that there's all kinds of things I don't know about it. So I just become more and more intrigued the better I get.
They are two men racing together, but two men very different. Greg LeMond, famous in Europe, $1 million contracts. Andy Hampsten, a new pro, a man who only months ago was living on sandwiches and begging rooms. And LeMond had Bernard Hinault controlling the chase.
When they come into Reno, Andy goes for a long sprint, hoping to outpower the faster LeMond. But it just doesn't work. LeMond picks his moment and just blasts by Andy, and Andy's pretty helpless at this moment. And it's all LeMond's victory, all LeMond's. A great battle. And after the battle, the competitors can be friends again.
The road race victory goes to Greg LeMond, followed by Hampsten and Canadian Alex Stida. The big change came in the overall standings. LeMond's victory moved him into the lead, followed by Hampsten. Steve Bauer dropped to third. The team standings remained the same.
Andy, you seem the strongest climber today. What do you think?
I think we're close enough where if he's having a good day, he can drop me. But if I'm having a good day, I might be able to drop him.
Any predictions for the rest of the race?
I think you'll see Greg and I attacking each other quite a bit.
And their next chance to do battle would come in just a few hours. A night race downtown. Stage number 6, a criterium in the gambling mecca of Reno, Nevada. Round and round and round the neon-lighted streets until someone wins the jackpot. In this stage, the racing became combat. When the field is tightly packed, moving quickly, jockeying for position, almost anything seems fair, as Connie and Alexei demonstrate.
As we come into the turn, my job is to put Alexei into the curve and slow him down.
Now I'm going to try to come back on the right.
But again, I block him into the curve.
This time, I'm going to get the jump on her. And that's it. I'm away. When you're riding in the field, there's riders on both sides of you. Intimidation and the physicalness of how you can ride your bike plays an important part in holding your position in the pack. It's of key importance, especially in criteriums, to be able to withstand any kind of physical abuse that people are going to throw out at you.
With one lap to go, this battle reached its full fury.
The 7-Eleven team really has full control here. Chris Carmichael, Ron Kiefel, and Doug Shapiro are all in a position to help Davis Phinney in this sprint.
But the Red Zinger team has its plan. Bernard Hinault, Greg LeMond have pushed Steve Bauer to the front. And down the backstretch, the speeds pick up for the final dangerous turn onto the finish line sprint.
Couple riders down the turn. Here's the sprint. And it's Davis Phinney sprinting up front with his teammate Ron Kiefel.
In Reno, Lucky 7-Eleven takes first, second, and third. Phinney, Kiefel, and Doug Shapiro. But the crowd's attention was focused on the crash in the turn.
Look at this in the center of your screen. Steve Bauer, without the team support of Davis Phinney, tries to take an impossible inside line to gain good position. Just slides out, goes sliding across the road. You can see from this angle sparks flying up. Other riders trying to avoid him, going into the fence right behind Davis. Another rider going over the bars. Steve Tilford going to the hay bales. Another Russian piling into the fence. 2 or 3 more riders piling into the crowd. And the carnage is over, and Davis Phinney has escaped it.
For Steve Bauer, the dejected look of a loser, and on his hip, a red badge, not of courage, but of foolishness. In contrast, a whimsical ride on an elephant's nose for stage winner Davis Phinney. In the general classification, the overall standings, there was no change. But in a matter of hours, all the racers would be flying high to Colorado for stage number 7. After pedaling for 5 days, virtually from San Francisco to Reno, the International Bicycle Classic packed its wheels for an airlift to Grand Junction, Colorado for Stage 7, a race called the Tour of the Moon. And this is the moon, Colorado National Monument, eroded by eons of time to form a lunar landscape that inspires awe. It also inspired the Western imagery of the new film American Flyers for Academy Award-winning screenwriter Steve Pesich.
To be on a bicycle and to be going through the plains or to be going over the mountains, you can't escape but feel you're part of the Old West. You can't, there's something about being a rider. You're on a bicycle, but you really feel like you're there with those guys on horses. You're there, no one's around. You're there sort of kind of extending the territory, if you will. And there's that wonderful feeling of you know, you don't have a home, and it's just you and the guys, and you're riding somewhere through the West.
Oldest trick in the book, Dave!
Only in cycling can you ride from the setting sun into a tour of the moon, across time. For a race that's more than a battle of men, it is a challenge of Mother Nature. She spent millions of years sculpting this course. It's 76 miles of spires, cliffs, and tunnels. They will try to conquer it in less than 3 hours. At the front of the pack, Greg LeMond, wearing the red striped leader's jersey, checks on his rival, Andy Hampsten. Once again, they are at the front of the pack.
It was on this serpentine climb that Olaf Jentsch of East Germany, Eric Solomon, Greg LeMond, and Andy Hampsten took control and came into town to the finish together.
Strung out around the final turn, it's Eric Solomon in front, followed by Jentsch, LeMond, and Hampsten. 350 meters to go, and then suddenly Solomon drops off and an early sprint develops. Jentsch and LeMond take off. Hampsten, in the purple, waits, knowing that he can only push for the last 200 meters, then makes his move, tries to go in between, and then this occurs. LeMond and Jentsch squeeze in. Hampsten protests.
Olaf Jentsch did win this bicycle race, but not without some controversy. In cycling, the commissars, coaches, and even the riders have the luxury of being able to review the tapes to see what exactly happened.
In this case, the protest centered around whether or not Olaf Jentsch actually did not hold his line in the final 200 meters. And as you can see here, he's struggling. His wheels are going from side to side, but he's holding his line quite well until the final few meters, and then his move is not really intentional. It's more just a lack of control. You see from the back view, both riders, especially Jentsch, is really struggling now, really going all out. And he tries to come in between them, and both Jentsch and LeMond gravitate towards each other to try to get a better feel of who's ahead, and Andy just gets squeezed out by his own mistake.
Olaf Jentsch was awarded the victory, but not the time reduction bonus. LeMond and Hampsten did get their time bonuses, and it changed the general classification. LeMond was the overall leader, but Hampsten had dropped 10 seconds further behind. Aspen, Colorado, a skier's paradise in winter, a mountain mecca in summer, transformed overnight into a race course.
Summertime, summertime, in the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, racing down that mountain trail,
on that bike of mine. He blows a tire and he blows too, and that's a very good sign, a sign that I will be the victor at the good old finish line. At the good old finish line.
Unlike Stage 7, which ended in controversy, this one began in controversy. The course was laid out to go up through the hills of Aspen. There was a downhill turn, which the riders considered too dangerous. Many of the riders surveyed the course before the race, including Andrew Hampsten, who tested the corner in question. A steep, narrow left past a construction site. The race start was delayed while construction workers tried to build up some banking in the hopes of making the turn safer for the cyclists. But the final decision would come later to change the course and eliminate the hill and the turn in question.
Thousands turned out to see the favorites, Greg LeMond, Bernard Hinault, Davis Phinney, and Andy Hampsten win. But on this day, it was riders from the back of the overall standings with no chance to win the Classic who slipped away to fight for a single-stage victory.
Thurlow Rogers, 27 minutes behind in the overall standings, took an early, courageous lead. Except for Russian Sergei Voronin and East German Dan Radke, the field was content to eye each other. And as they came into the final turn, Sergei Voronin and Dan Radke were no match for Thurlow Rogers' tremendous determination. Thurlow Rogers on the right, powered to a victory. His first victory, his team's first victory in 10 years. And obviously a very special moment for this 84 Olympian. Perhaps the special moment of his career.
And Rogers' victory was also satisfying to his teammate, Andy Hampsten, who remained in second in the overall. Team standings did not change as the Classic moved to Vail. A traditional race stop, Vail tested the cyclists with a demanding 50-mile criterium. Underdog American Bob Roll rolled to triumph through Vail's crowd-lined tunnel of noise. After these two criteriums, the overall standings became the focus of the Classic, the shootout between Greg LeMond and Andy Hampsten. The world's greatest cycling stage races have one thing in common, mountains, but few as severe as the challenge of Stage 10, climbing to 11,316 feet after starting at Vail. The distance of the route from Vail to Copper Mountain is only 66 miles, but this course tests the racers as if they've gone far more than 100, and landmarks along the way depict the challenge, Battle Mountain, then climax before the descent.
Vail, the start of this race, sits higher than any climb in the Tour de France. By the time the racers get to Fremont Pass, they will have reached 11,300 feet, the highest point in this year's Classic. This should have been a day for the Colombians, like Alfonso Lopez, specialists in mountain climbing and used to high altitude, but not the cold.
Connie, tell me about the effects of altitude. We're going up to 11,000 feet at one point in this race.
At altitude, the pressure of oxygen is reduced, so with every breath that the cyclist takes, you get less oxygen to your lungs and to your working muscles. And as a consequence, on a difficult climb like this, you're coming up and your muscles aren't getting the oxygen that they need, and they become stiff and heavy and very tired.
But here riding at almost 11,000 feet, Jeff Pierce looks unaffected by the altitude. And as the time card comes up, he has 10 seconds on the Colombians and a minute 44 on the chase, led by the powerful Bernard Hinault.
Behind him is teammate Greg LeMond, and then Andrew Hampsten, chasing LeMond for the overall lead. Hampsten needs to make his attack in the mountains, where he is king, but Hinault is repaying a debt, controlling the pace for LeMond, who worked for the Frenchman in the Tour de France.
The main objective is to help Greg win the race because this is his country, this is his race, and I'm here because I really appreciate Greg's help in the Tour de France.
LeMond follows his own strategy, unconcerned about the day's leaders. Cycling is a chess game. In the overall race, LeMond and Hampsten are the only kings on the board, and LeMond has a clear strategy.
I'll have to ride defensively because I have the lead. He'd be the one who would have to attack me, and I'm just going to have to watch him. The next closest guy is 6 minutes down, so I'm not worried about anybody else but Andy, and which makes it easy to control the race, so he's the only guy I have to really watch.
Bernard Hinault and Greg LeMond are controlling the pace. So far, Andy Hampsten is unable to attack. It seems that nothing is going to change. It will depend.
And on whether Andy can use his innate ability to climb at altitude and to mount a real offensive on the final ascent to Fremont Pass.
It's my opportunity to to follow up on everything that I've been told, everything that I believe in myself, and just ride my very best in the mountains where I'm at my best and see if I can get rid of Greg.
Getting rid of Greg required an attack at the right moment. Hampsten thought he knew the course and had a mental picture of where to make his move. He was too late to catch Pierce, but did catch the Colombians. They worked together over the top of the climb.
The two Colombians and Hampsten were chasing one man out in front with a break of 1 minute, Jeff Pierce. Third in this race a year before, he had already crested the hill, started his descent, and would reach speeds of 65 miles per hour.
With two slightly built Colombians helping Andy on the descent, would he be able to stay away from the more powerful, heavier Le Mans?
If Hampsten could beat Le Mans by 1:45, he would take the overall lead. But this day's race lead belonged to Jeff Pierce.
Back up the road, Greg LeMond had caught, and Andy Hampsten's bid for overall race leadership was history.
And in town, Jeff Pierce got a dramatic victory, the kind that every racer dreams of, all alone, well out in front of the pack. A minute later, the race for second place. The sprint belongs to Greg LeMond, who outpowers Andy Hampsten. And in the overall standings, LeMond gains another 10 seconds over Hampsten. Jeff Pierce has moved into third. After the race, Andy Hampsten admitted that he had made an error in his tactical planning.
I've only driven over the climb, and I guess I rode over it about 6 years ago, and it was a lot shorter than I remembered. And by the time I attacked and got away from Greg and everyone else, but there just wasn't enough climbing to catch Pierce. I caught the two Colombians, but Pierce was gone.
Team standings also changed. Pierce's win moved Schwinn into second. Hampsten's climbing pulled Levi Raleigh to third. 7-11 dropped to fourth. In Estes Park, Colorado, congratulations from Bernard Hinault to Red Zinger teammate Steve Bauer for his second win at stage 11. Bauer's domination of the 47-mile circuit here announced his return to form after the Reno crash, but did not affect the overall standings. Then, 1 day later, and a hop over the Colorado foothills, the Classic ready for stage 12. And once again, the event was plagued by protests and demands for a course change. Originally designed to go from Golden to Boulder on a route of severe climbs, racers complained about the dangers of a downhill gravel section. This was the scheduled route on Highway 46. After brief debate, the officials rerouted the race over Highway 72. Easier terrain. The second part of the course remained the same, reaching its summit at 9,314 feet in Ward, then descending down to Lyons and on into Boulder.
Though reaching the same altitude, this revised climb to Wonderview was easier than the original course. That and a strong tailwind created problems no one anticipated, though Andy Hampsten, seen here riding at the front of the pack, knew the changes would have an impact on him.
Of course, a lot easier now. It's the climbs, it's about the same length, but in severity, it's about half as hard. So it's going to be harder for me to get time on LeMond and Hinault and his team. But then again, the top of the climb's closer to the finish, so if I do get away on my own, I don't have as far to go.
Early on, Hampsten pushes the pace, followed by the best mountain men, LeMond, Shapiro, and the Colombians. Connie, what about their technique?
Their styles are quite a bit different. Andy Hampsten is a great climber, so are the Colombians. Greg LeMond is a good climber. His job today is just to stay with Andy Hampsten. He'll be looking at Andy Hampsten's calves the whole way up the climb. Hampsten has the Colombians with him. If they force the pace, they might break LeMond.
A moment later, Doug Shapiro, the defending champion of the Classic, leads the pace. Looking over his shoulder, he sees this man, Andy Hampsten, who comes out of his saddle and makes his break. Hampsten on the attack, trying to leave Shapiro and LeMond behind. Will LeMond follow? Hampsten wonders, checks under his arm, and yes, Greg LeMond comes up in pursuit. As they reach Wonderview, Hampsten has a lead of 10 seconds, but there are 63 miles to go. And Hampsten continues to stretch his lead.
Hampsten's riding really smoothly uphill. He's got about a 35-second lead. LeMond is a little bit struggling trying to catch him. It's a really good move for Andy. It has real possibilities.
On the short descent into Nederland, Hampsten out in front uses every technique he knows to try to stay away.
A rider alone works 20 to 30% harder than one tucked in the comfortable slipstream of the pack.
And on the uphill grind, Hampsten takes on new nourishment and shows that being a waiter in this drive-in restaurant is one of the toughest jobs in sport. On the way out of Nederland, Hampsten is well out in front as LeMond sees him a minute away. And now LeMond is forced to go it alone. None of his teammates have joined him in the chase.
Hinault back in the field, struggles in great difficulty. Myers.
Then a catastrophic accident. Watch the lower left. Sergei Voronin of the Soviet Union is bucked from his bicycle like a rodeo rider in a terrible crash.
Stunned and confused, his first instinct is to continue. He has to finish today, or he can't start tomorrow.
Let's roll. Okay. No, new bike. Let's go.
There's talk of finding him a new bike, but what he needs now are the medics. He won't be able to continue today.
And this is the culprit. A stick flipped up into the wheel of Voronin's bike inadvertently. For this Soviet rider, the classic is over. But up ahead, the race continues.
Andy Hampsten is really tired. He's looking back, he's taking a drink, he's resigned to being caught by Lamont, who is also really tired from all the tremendous work he's had to do to chase Andy. Doug Shapiro is really strong. He hasn't worked much this race. He's taking advantage of the fact that Lamont and Andy are both very tired. He broke away from them, and he's riding down South St. Vrain Canyon alone toward Boulder.
Speeding toward the finish, the town that gave birth to the classic, Shapiro cannot possibly anticipate the harrowing circumstances that await him. The shortened course and tailwinds bring him to the city outskirts earlier than expected, 2 minutes ahead of the chase group. Tens of thousands have gathered at the finish line to watch their local hero win this race. But local police have yet to clear the streets, and in a panic, establish a roadblock. Surprised, Shapiro skirts it, his passion for victory driving him to the finish line.
I almost got killed. I almost went flying in the back of a police car if it wasn't for our director, because there was just a blockade in the middle of the road. It's just ridiculous. And then this morning they changed the course when every rider had planned on riding the Golden Gate course. So the way the race has been going, my God, maybe if I would have slowed down, they would have said, well, you crossed the finish line just 30 seconds ahead. So I didn't want to take any chances. So now I can't lose either way.
Squeezing his way between vehicles on streets that were supposed to be cleared of traffic, Shapiro takes every risk to make his way to the finish line and ensure that the victory will be his. For Doug Shapiro, what should have been a triumphant salute has been diminished to a disappointed wave. And for head official of the Classic, Ian Emerson, disbelief.
First time I've ever known anything like it. I love lost for words.
The entire audience was lost for words, as were the other racers, who had never seen anything like this in their careers and hoped they wouldn't again. But for Doug Shapiro, it was a victory he would never forget. You rode to make a statement, though, didn't you? You didn't just ride to win.
That's right. I said it yesterday. I got a lot to prove, and, well, I did it, and I'm really happy.
Andy Hampsten's failed attack left him in second place in the overall standings. Doug Shapiro's first Classic stage win moved him to third. Bernard Hinault's troubles dropped him from 5th to 9th. With 745 miles traveled, the Classic moved on to stage 13, 204 miles to go. In time trialing, one racer against the clock, this is the perfect man, Bernard Hinault. In this event, he uses special equipment.
And the cyclist shoes are also special. They have a plastic molded sole and a special cleat with a slit which fits firmly into the pedal. The combination of the toe clip and the cleat enable the cyclist to be able to pull up as well as push down.
Hinault's bike is unique to time trials. With a smaller front wheel and a rear solid disc wheel, it's much more aerodynamic than the normal bike.
Predictably, Bernard Hinault got the victory, covering 11.2 miles in 24 minutes, 20 seconds. This man was the surprise. Andy Hampsten finished second, just 10 seconds behind Hinault. Without the help of his team, Greg LeMond finished third, another 4 seconds back. And it seemed as soon as the Niwot time trial ended, the Denver-Tivoli Criterium began, the second race of the day. And Denver was hot.
And Davis Phinney burst from a compact field and sizzled the competition on the way to his third stage victory in this year's Classic.
Davis Phinney across the finish line, his 21st top 3 finish in the history of the International Bicycle Classic. As a sprinter, Phinney is unbeatable. After these 2 races, the overall standings were unchanged, though Hampsten had gained 4 seconds on LeMond. In team standings, Levi Raleigh moved into second on the wheels of Hampsten's strong time trial showing. Coming up next, stage 15, the legendary Morgul Bismarck. On the edge of the Colorado Plains, where the flatlands meet the foothills, the Classic racers meet for their final road circuit and a last chance for a runaway win. They may start slowly, but they will ride hard. Stage number 15, a road circuit called the Morgul-Bismarck. Now, believe it or not, Morgul was a cat and Bismarck a dog who belonged to a cyclist who frequently rode this route and thought it needed a name. But this year, Morgul and Bismarck, the cat and dog, are Hampsten and Le Mans, who will chase, claw, and scratch at each other for 92 miles.
That's 7 laps of this 13-mile course, a course which has undulating hills, a very fast descent, and is most famous for its 2 hills, the Hump and the Wall, a tortuous stretch ending at the finish line.
This became the story not of cats and dogs, but of brothers, Irishmen Alan and Paul McCormick.
In the back of the pack, Lamond and Hampsten played the role of now cat and mouse, coyly shadowing one another. Though the race comprised 7 circuits, it took on its personality after the first lap. A small lead group, including the 2 Irishmen, and a chase group, at times 4.5 minutes behind, until the closing lap, when the attack from behind was mounted.
Alan McCormick still in front, but as they neared the bottom of the wall, the chase group was coming fast. And the other riders in the break were blowing apart, but Alan McCormick held it together, held on, and made his move. Up the last, grueling ascent of the wall, Alan McCormick gave his all-out effort, all the way to the finish line, with the crowd cheering him on. It was Alan McCormick grinding out the final few meters to win Morgul-Bismarck.
Victory will soothe the pain of the winner, but in second place, Chris Carmichael's agony is all too apparent. Still further back, Paul McCormick had spent everything to ensure his brothers win. The Irishman had been the story, not the overall race leaders, who were too preoccupied with shadowing each other well back in the pack. Still, though they weren't factors in this race, the general classification remained the same.
Get in here, Paul! Get in here!
Is this... Did you guys work together to make this happen?
Yeah, well, he was away, I sat on behind, and then I was away, he sat. So, we had a plan from last night to just go from the blocks.
Is this one of the happiest moments of your racing career here, what's going on?
Well, I never won the Morgul. I always finished 3rd and 2nd and 8th. Today was the best, you know.
I think the crowd would like to say something to you here. What's everybody think of this guy?
The invention of the bicycle created a furor for the Victorian lady. Tandem bicycles found the daring woman up front, but seldom alone. Being hampered by 15 pounds of voluminous clothing and binding corsets wasn't easy. Long dresses caught in the chain, causing embarrassment and sometimes injury. But the bicycle gave women a measure of freedom that was difficult to give up. The Victorian lady's physical bondage disappeared as bloomers and knickerbockers emerged. Women rejoiced in the poetry of motion. They went from watching to racing and being watched. Then came the 1984 Olympic Games. In the skin-tight aerodynamic suits that have long since replaced bloomers, finely tuned women competed for the first time in a sport that has come of age.
And these are the women of the International Bicycle Classic. 52 riders who competed in 11 stages, including time trials, road races, criteriums, and circuits totaling 365 miles, all within Colorado. The stars in the field included Marianne Berglund, 1983 world champion from Sweden, and pre-race favorite, Olympic silver medalist Rebecca Twigg, forced to withdraw due to illness. From West Germany, Sandra Schumacher, Olympic bronze medalist. And this woman, the story of the race, Jeannie Longo of France.
From the opening criterium in Grand Junction, Jeannie Longo escaped her past as perennial runner-up and took this sprint from the field easily. In stage 2, now in the race leader's jersey, she continued her winning ways. On the demanding Tour of the Moon course, she dominated the field with her powerful climbing style. Are you surprised at how well you're doing so far?
Not at all, not because I did a lot of progress in sprints, and this year I won everything by sprint, so...
And you're climbing too, you were definitely the strongest climber. Did that surprise you?
I climb, but you know, Maria Canins is not here and you are not here, so it's different.
Perhaps Jeannie Longo of France downplays her abilities. Without last year's winner, Maria Canins, and Olympic gold medalist Connie Carpenter-Phinney, there was room for new racers to emerge, like Madonna Harris of New Zealand.
Madonna comes to cycling from triathlons. She's very strong, and in the Maroon Bells course, she demonstrated her strength by attacking up the climb. Inga Thompson made the U.S. Olympic team last year after only 4 months of racing. Her background is in downhill skiing and cross-country running. She's a cyclist, blessed with phenomenal natural strength. But this race belongs to Jeannie Longo. Madonna Harris stays with her coming into Aspen, but it's all Jeannie Longo in the sprint, and she wins her 3rd race in a row. Inga Thompson also broke away from the pack and finished 3rd, several minutes behind Jeannie Longo and Madonna Harris. Stage 4, Vale. Jeannie Longo again out front, but Inga Thompson this time goes with her and starts to chisel away at Madonna Harris's grip on 2nd place. In this race, Inga Thompson picks up 38 seconds on Madonna Harris. Stage 5, Estes Park. Again, Inga Thompson whittles away at Madonna Harris. This time, again, she finishes 2nd behind Jeannie Longo, but gains a minute and a half on Harris and begins to close in on her lead. Though only in her 2nd year of racing, she has some experience on Madonna Harris, who's only in her 1st year. The difference really showed in an 11-mile time trial the next day, where Thompson took 43 seconds out of Harris en route to this stage victory. Thompson's riding smoothly, and it puts her into 2nd place. Harris presses on, now in 3rd place, and shows the strain of this, her 1st classic ride.
In the final stage at North Boulder Park, Longo's insurmountable lead wasn't even threatened by a broken spoke, and the added disadvantage of no team support to help her ride back to the front. But for Harris and Thompson, the stage was crucial. As they came into the last turn, they set up for the final sprint, knowing that whoever finished 1st would finish 2nd overall in the International Bicycle Classic. Madonna Harris came around the turn 1st. Inga Thompson, for a moment, seemed to be out of contention. Then she pulled up on Harris's wheel, setting up a draft, and then made her move to the outside. A sprint to the finish line. Inga Thompson, the more powerful, sweeps by 2nd overall. Madonna Harris takes 3rd.
Although the women's race may have lacked some of the luster of the men's race, for Jeannie Longo, it was a chance to shine. For others, an opportunity to rise up and look to the future.
The final standings, Jeannie Longo of France, champion of the International Bicycle Classic, followed by American Inga Thompson and New Zealand's Madonna Harris. But for the men, 1 race to go. Returning to North Boulder Park, Steve Bauer of Canada won the final stage, stage 16, and was exultant. His Redsinger team won the team title, followed by Levi's Raleigh in 2nd, Schwinn in 3rd. The Eastern Europeans had proved no threat. But for the crowd, these men were the heroes. Champion Greg LeMond, runner-up Andy Hampston, and in 3rd, Doug Shapiro.
What are your reflections about this race and about your future?
Well, I've improved a lot this year, and I've really proven it here at the race, getting 2nd to Greg LeMond. He rode a superb race, and I did my best race, so I'm really happy because I feel I won 2nd place instead of just sitting back and letting him dictate the way the race went.
Congratulations! 4 years ago you won. This is your 1st race in America since then. Tell us how it feels.
Oh, it feels great. I mean, I can't believe our team's done so well. Steve won today, and I've had great teamwork, man, today. Bernard Hinault pulled the last 10 laps, 12 laps, and just controlled the race. And it's great to win, especially with this crowd here in Boulder.
Greg, it seems to me that LeMond's victory is due in great part to Bernard Hinault's help, and for me, the real hero of this race is Andrew Hampston.
For the women, Jeannie Longo is tops, but Inga Thompson is the fast-rising star.
And all along the route, 950 miles, from where we began in San Francisco to where we finished in Boulder, Colorado, the crowds have been extraordinary, comparable to those in Europe, where this sport is king. For Connie Carpenter-Phinney and Alexei Greywall, I'm Greg Lewis. Goodbye from the International Bicycle Classic.
Now the seats are all empty. Let the roadies take the stage. Pack it up and tear it down. They're the first to come and the last to leave, working for that minimum
minimum wage. They'll set up in another town. Tonight the people were so fine. They waited there in line, and when they got up on their feet, he made the show. And that was sweet, but I can hear the sound of slamming doors and folding chairs. That's a sound they'll never know. I roll them cases out and lift them amps, and haul them trusses down and get them up them ramps. 'Cause when it comes